Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and talk about this subject that I found to be very particularly interesting. And this is going to be a video, I believe, by that of Fox News. Now, I'm not someone overall that really watches a whole lot of the mainstream media, and I'm not someone that, at least just blindly believes a whole lot of the mainstream media. And really, I'm not someone that just blindly believes people to begin with, because what you find out in life, as you kind of grow up, is that a lot of the media or a lot of people that, I've always stated this, that they don't really analyze something in terms of depth or intellect. They pretty much just take a look at it and then they judge it on an instance off a complete emotion. They may not know any idea what the hell they're talking about. And for those of you overall that know my channel and how long it's been around, I believe for about 4 or 5 years now. The reason why this channel actually started was because of the controversy behind the Tyson Fury Deontay Wilder situation, where really there was no controversy behind it whatsoever, but because you had so many Deontay Wilder fans and so many people that actually bought in to that narrative and they had no idea anything about boxing, the narrative kept growing and growing and growing. But anyways, I just wanted to talk about that because that's kind of how my channel started, and that's why I like to review a certain amount of videos and talk about certain subjects or topics that may be looked at as controversial or, maybe blown a little bit out of proportion. But this subject I thought was very particularly interesting. I believe that there was a little bit of a spat between two Olympic athletes, or one former Olympic athlete by the name of Riley Gaines, who you see here on the left, who, has recently been labeled, I believe, as a conservative activist. And of course, Simone Biles, who was a gymnast, looked at as the best gymnast of her day, or someone that's, overall may debatably be the greatest gymnast of all time in many people's eyes. Well, apparently she recently kind of fired back at Riley Gaines for a tweet that she had made. But what the tweet overall was about, of course, is that Riley Gaines, she ended up criticizing a Minnesota softball high school team, I believe, which of course was mainly of women, but they ended up winning the championship with a born biological male on their team that, of course, was transitioning as a transgender to a woman. And of course, Riley Gaines, a lot of people thought that, she had a right to kind of criticize that. And in my personal view, she did as well, especially for a woman that was competing once upon a time, I believe, against a transitioning female, quote unquote, that was a born biological male, in her competition, when she swam professionally. But anyway, Simone Biles ended up firing back against her, basically alleging that she should be trying to make the transgender community more comfortable and that she should also be trying to find a way to include the transgender community in sports, But just thought that this is very particularly interesting. And then this, of course, brings up the question, should transgender athletes be a part of sports, and should born biological males, or people with a high level of testosterone, should they really be allowed overall, to compete in that in female sports? Well, let's talk about it. Let's see overall what Fox News and what these guys had to say.
Seven-time Olympic medalist Simone Biles stepping into the trans sports debate, sparring with Riley Gaines, calling her truly sick over her comments on girls' sports. What's this all about? Well, Griff Jenkins live in Washington with details. Hi, Griff.
Hey, good morning, Dana. It seems we have an Olympic-sized catfight on our hands over the transgender athlete debate. Now, look, this all began when Biles slammed Gaines on X after Gaines criticized a Minnesota high school league for celebrating a state title won by a women's softball team with a biological male pitcher. Biles wrote this: "You're truly sick. All of this campaigning because you lost a race, straight up sore loser. You should be uplifting the trans community." She even called Gaines a bully, but Gaines fired back by resurfacing an old 2017 Biles tweet in which the Olympian was reacting to the World Artistic Gymnastics Championship, saying, "Good thing guys don't compete against girls or he'd take all of the gold medals." In another exchange, Biles even compared Gaines to a man as the swimmer blasted the gymnast, saying she might have.
And it's very interesting, Simone Biles calling this girl a quote unquote man and reacting the way that she did. Because there's no offense against Simone Biles, there's no offense whatsoever. But out of many girl athletes overall, to where if there was anyone calling a girl that said quote unquote looked like a man, it's no offense against Simone Biles, but she would be Exhibit A. It's no offense. But Simone Biles, when you really take a look at her, she really does not have a whole lot of womanly features. I mean, she has a neck that is as thick as a goddamn toad's. I mean, overall, her facial structure, even to be quite honest with you, is not that particularly feminine. When you really take a look at her hips and at her torso, it's very, very skinny compared to her shoulders and her chest region. So I mean, it's like, no offense, but Simone Biles is not really someone that really should be talking. It is what it is. And that's not me stating that Riley Gaines is necessarily the most feminine looking woman, or someone that I would state as someone that may be the most feminine that I've ever seen. But at the end of the day, she's definitely more feminine looking than Simone Biles. I mean, I'm sorry, but it just is what it is. No offense, but it's whatever. And let me also state this, because there are a certain amount of people that believe that there are certain female athletes that were born biological males, but that they were eventually used, and transitioned into females later on, so they could be high level competitors within that of certain female sports. So later on, they could be used for a great amount of agenda pushing, or to be the particular go to their sports. And do I believe that that's highly possible? I think that is possible. I'm not going to say with 100% certainty because I don't have enough evidence, but all I'm going to state is that when I take a look at certain women athletes like Brittany Griner, or even Simone Biles to a degree, although she is very small, but Simone Biles, when you really take a look at her build, I mean, she doesn't have a whole lot of womanly features. And who knows, maybe there's a little bit of a deeper reason why Simone Biles is arguing for the transgender community. Maybe Simone Biles is not as womanly as what we think. I don't know. But I've stated this before, and a lot of people may personally disagree with me. Once again, on the theory that there are certain women overall in I believe athletics or sports that were born biological males and then later on transitioned into females. Do I believe that that's highly possible? Yes, I do. Just my personal view. And if you were to ask me one of those females that I believe, that I would have at least a 99.9%, possibility, would be Serena Williams. It's no offense. But when I take a look at that woman, that alleged woman, I'm sorry, but I have never seen a woman. Not even Chris Cyborg would have the level of testosterone within her system as what I see in Serena Williams. At least Chris Cyborg once upon a time had like some feminine traits, but like Serena Williams, it's like not only is her musculature way different than any other female athlete that I've seen compete in tennis history, but then on top of that, like her shoulders are very broad and wide, compared to her hip ratio. On top of that, the girl has a jawline of Arnold Schwarzenegger. She has, the skull shape and the skull thickness, of a bull. I mean, I'm sorry, but, that is not a woman.
Wise have never taken the podium. Watch.
If Simone's inclusive dream came true, she would have 0 Olympic medals and no one would even know who she is.
Agreed. And for those of you overall that are not aware, once again, just to explain a little bit more about Serena Williams, who competes within that of women's tennis, because people have debated for so long, overall about, is Serena Williams the greatest tennis player of all time? Well, she's the greatest, debatably the greatest women's tennis player of all time. And really, to be quite honest with you, it's really even a debate if she's that. Many of the tennis circles will try to tell you and sit here and debate that Serena Williams, that she's the clear greatest of all time, and it's not even a competition. First of all, she does not have the most amount of number ones. She does not have the most amount of days or weeks at number one. That's Steffi Graf, I believe, for women's. She doesn't even have the most amount of Grand Slams of all time. So I don't, there's a specific reason why they keep pushing Serena Williams. But a big part of the reason why they push Serena Williams, not only because she's a woman, but also because she's a black woman. Now, is that me stating overall that they're pushing her overall because, they want a black woman just to be on top over every other race? Not necessarily. The reason why they're using Serena Williams to such a degree, especially in a sport, where usually the black athletes have not been quite as dominant because, they probably haven't participated as much in there, is because they realize that Serena Williams, that she's going to have a great amount of influence. So Serena Williams, people like LeBron James, Serena Williams, and certain people like that, they've been using them for so long, overall to once again push a lot of their liberalized agendas. They've been using it for a very, very, very long time, So, it is what it is. But, in order to, just to talk about that situation, because Serena Williams is usually the topic when you talk about the quote unquote, GOAT, or the greatest, women's athlete of all time. And many people like to compare her to men's athletes. First of all, even if we were to have that conversation, she is not the greatest tennis player of all time. The greatest tennis player of all time is Novak Djokovic. And it's really not even a conversation. And I've had that conversation a multitude of times. But Djokovic not only has the most amount of Grand Slams of all time, he has literally every other record But like I stated, not to digress too much here, but the reason why I bring up Serena Williams is for those of you that don't know, she was number one for so long in the women's circuit. She faced a man, apparently overall that was like 500th or 600th in the world, wasn't even in great shape apparently, and he literally battered her, in a series of sets. So anyone that is arguing overall that, biological born males should be should be allowed to transition where they still have a great amount of testosterone within their body because their musculature and their bone density is always going to be different compared to that of regular females. The fact that anyone would actually argue that they should be allowed to compete against females, I mean, to be quite honest with you, pretty much borderlines on psychoses. It's just ridiculous.
Meanwhile, Dana, the White House is warning Minnesota over the controversial women's softball title, saying in a statement, President Trump is protecting women in sports and restoring common sense. Those who choose to...
Agreed, and that's one of the things that he's doing that I fully support. And listen, all I'm going to state is this. I'm not an advocate for Donald Trump whatsoever. I'm not a person that follows politics. I'm not a person that supports any politician. Because all these politicians, if you really read up on a lot of them or read up at least certain testimonies of certain people that allege things about them, and it seems very, very relevant because a lot of these people have settlement cases or certain things like that. But if you read up on a lot of these politicians are up to really dirty things behind the scenes. And I'm talking about all sorts of things: money laundering, sex trafficking, murder, sacrifice, all that other stuff. Like a lot of these people don't know what the hell these politicians are really up to behind the scenes. But, and Donald Trump, I don't think is completely innocent of that. But the thing is that, what these people will try to tell you, especially the liberals, is that Donald Trump has been the worst president and that he divides us more than ever. Let me ask you something. Even under the presidency of Barack Obama or, Joe Biden, who are both liberals, what did they do necessarily to help the black community or the Latino communities or anything like that? What did they necessarily do? Did police brutality get any better for that of the black community? A community that's, overall has suffered, I believe overall, a decent amount of more of a higher rate of police brutality for the amount of small population that they have. Did it get any better? Did any problems within any of those minority communities get any better? I mean, what problems has Joe Biden or Barack Obama really quote unquote fixed, for anybody instead of, unless we're talking about the LGBTQ movement or something like that. What have they really done in order to change things for the better? So, I mean, don't get it twisted. I'm not for Donald Trump or anything like that. But there are a few things that, in my view, that, do I support what he's doing? Yes, I do. Do I support overall the fact that he is trying to ban biological born males to compete against women's athletes? Absolutely. No doubt about it. There really is no argument about that in my mind. Do I also support him in my personal view, about, no abortion past the third trimester? At least overall, according to his, testimony, yes, I do. And some people overall would believe that abortion should not be legal whatsoever. I'm not going to go that extreme with it. But abortion past the third trimester, yes, in my personal view, that should not be legal. A lot of people might have a problem with that, but it is what it is. But, there are certain things that Donald Trump overall, in my personal view, there are certain things that I would support about it, is what it is, but anyway.
Violate federal law will be held accountable. Finally, worth noting, the transgender Minnesota pitcher pitched 5 consecutive games with shutouts in 4 out of 5, including the championship, which amounts, Dana, to 21 consecutive innings without allowing a single run. Dana?
Now, apparently, according to a lot of the liberals, what they were claiming is that, overall, that this girl was not the quote-unquote best pitcher, this alleged girl, that she was not the best pitcher, and that they're basically trying to allege that it did not give them a significant advantage. And if those statistics are true, which it does appear to be true because that is a highly specific statistic, then obviously it does prove that they gave them a very high level advantage. So basically every statistic, no matter what you take a look at, whether it be Serena Williams competing against a male athlete or a male swimmer who was average in the male leagues, but then went to the women's leagues and became a gold medalist or I believe a first placer, I believe. So every statistic basically shows that biological born males, even if they're transitioning, they have an advantage over women in women's sports. So of course this really should not be legal because it's a very clear unfair level advantage. But there's still certain people like Simone Biles trying to push this. Now the question is why is Simone Biles pushing it? Is it because She's pretty much completely bought off overall by certain sponsors that are supporting her and telling her what to do. I have no doubt about that. But is there possibly another reason behind this as well? Maybe.
All right, Griff, thank you.
Yeah, let's bring on the host of Outkick's Don't At Me with Dan Dakich. Dan, good morning to you. Nancy Mace kind of got on this thing here with Simone Biles going after Riley Gaines. She says, honey, if biological men competed in women's gymnastics, odds are no one would know your name. And then the USA columnist Nancy Armour took the sides of Biles. Simone Biles shows her greatness again in standing up for the transgender community. What's fair here when you've got a transgender male playing on a woman's team and leads them to a state championship?
Well, what's fair is, and I've said this forever, this is simple. There's no bylaw that says every transgender person has to compete against women. There's no bylaw for this. There's no rule. There's no amendment. Very simple. If you are transitioning men to women, go play with the men. If you're transitioning woman to men, go play with the men. Everybody plays against the women, and that just simply isn't fair. Nancy Armour couldn't have been dumber. She said there is no biology that suggests men are, in fact, bigger, stronger than women. Well, of course there is. Even Serena Williams.
Of course there is. And of course he's going to bring up the same study overall that I mentioned as well. That person is just another stupid-ass super liberal. And don't get it twisted once again. I'm not conservative in any way. But the thing is that, the reason why I get so much on the liberals is because the liberals will always try to tell you this bullshit about how they're for everybody and everybody's rights and blah, 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 and the equality for everybody. Well, the equality for everybody at certain times will come at the expense of others. And the reason why I say that is because if you're trying to make it out like men and women are completely equal, they're not, especially physically. It is what it is. And that's why every statistic shows that whenever there is a top tier level male, usually they will end up beating that of the top tier level female. It is what it is. For those of you that know, Amanda Nunes, who of course is looked at as the greatest female fighter of all time, in that of MMA or the UFC, Jorge Masvidal, he ended up overall stating, that a lot of the, lighter weight fighters, even the 125 pounders or 135 pounders, that they'd even have to go light on Amanda Nunes. Someone overall that, is a high level MMA athlete, but anyway.
Williams, the greatest tennis player of all time, played the 350th ranked.
Well, she's debatably the greatest female tennis players of all time, but anyway.
And got whooped. I mean, whooped. The Simone Biles thing is ridiculous. Look, you could
I agree.
Respect if Simone Biles had a difference of opinion in this issue. 90% of America believes that men shouldn't participate against women. It's amazing.
And those people actually have something called logic and common sense. No offense, but just in my personal view, anyone that basically would disagree with that, no offense, but you're mentally ill. Just my personal view of it. And I'm not trying to get in an argument with anyone. I'm not trying to attack anyone. But that's pretty common sense. Anyway.
We were even having this conversation. But to come out and just talk about being sick, a sore loser, that shows your ignorance. And Simone Biles truly showed her stupidity in this.
What? I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
But anyways, that pretty much was about it for this video. I just thought that was very particularly interesting. But thank you all so much for watching. We'll see where this goes. But I agree 100% overall with, Riley Bates or whatever her name is. Riley Gaines, excuse me. But, 100% agree with her on this situation. No way, no how that it should be legal overall, to have that happen. But anyway, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.